Let me tell you about the stupidest regulation in the entire Galactic Federation. And trust me, that's saying something, considering these are the same people who require a 14-page form just to flush a toilet on a class starship. The Universal Biological Companion Prohibition Act, or as we call it in the trade, the No Pets Rule. Article 847B of the Federation Starship Safety Code, subsection Why Can't We Have Nice Things? Enacted after what the bureaucrats delicately referred to as the Tribble Incident of 2387, though anyone who lived through that particular nightmare knows there were at least 6 other incidents that should have been warning enough. Captain Vex Thornwall here, commanding officer of the cargo freighter Stellar Drift, and I've been hauling freight through this galaxy for 23 years. Long enough to remember when you could still bring a goldfish aboard without filling out forms in triplicate. Those were simpler times. Stupider times, maybe, but definitely simpler. See, the thing about biological companions is they're unpredictable. And space, well, space doesn't much care for unpredictability. Space prefers things neat, contained, and preferably not reproducing at exponential rates in your ventilation system. The Aldorian Council learned this the hard way when their ambassador's harmless pet managed to evolve into a hive mind in just 3 hyperspace jumps. The cleanup took 6 months and 2 exorcists. My crew's used to the rules by now. We've got Pip, our chief engineer, who's so enthusiastic about regulations she actually reads the updates for fun. Kid's got issues, but she keeps our engines running, so I don't ask questions. There's Commander Zara Quinn, our human liaison officer, who follows protocol like it's scripture, and somehow makes it look effortless. And then there's Grok, our security chief, who stands 7 feet tall, has skin like granite, and once cried for an hour after accidentally stepping on a flower during shore leave. We're a good crew, a clean crew. A crew that absolutely, positively does not violate Federation regulations regarding biological companions. Which is why I should have been more suspicious when our new human crew member showed up with luggage that looked suspiciously like it was breathing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand just how seriously the Federation takes this pet ban. They've got sensors, inspectors, and enough red tape to gift-wrap a moon. The penalty for harboring an unauthorized biological companion ranges from hefty fines to losing your operating license, depending on whether said companion has tentacles, exhibits hive-mind behavior, or, heaven forbid, purrs. And the inspections? Random, thorough, and conducted by beings who apparently had their sense of humor surgically removed at birth. They'll scan every square inch of your ship with equipment so sensitive it can detect a single pet hair from 3 decks away. So when I say we don't allow pets on the Stellar Drift, I mean it. Not a goldfish, not a hamster, not even one of those trendy virtual pets that exist only in digital space. Nothing cute, nothing cuddly, and absolutely nothing that might decide the cargo bay looks like a perfect place to build a nest. Which brings me to Jake Martinez, our newest crew member, and the reason I now understand why some species develop stress-induced molting. Jake came highly recommended from the Personnel Bureau. Clean record, excellent references, specialized training in atmospheric systems. What they failed to mention was that he traveled with enough luggage to outfit a small colony, including one particular duffel bag that he guarded like it contained the galaxy's last chocolate bar. First red flag should have been the way he positioned that bag in his quarters. Not tucked under the bunk like normal gear, but right next to his pillow where he could reach it in his sleep. Second red flag was the way he talked to it when he thought no one was listening. Soft, reassuring whispers that made absolutely no sense, unless you happened to be comforting something small and furry. But the dead giveaway? The fish. We stopped at Kepler Station for routine resupply, and Jake volunteered for shore duty. Came back with standard crew rations, regulation cleaning supplies, and 30 pounds of premium fish fillets. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged and said he was trying to eat healthier. Right. Because nothing says healthy human diet like enough raw tuna to feed a small army. Then there were the noises. Pip reported strange sounds coming from the ventilation system near Jake's quarters. Soft bumping, like something small was moving around in there. When pressed, she insisted it was probably just normal ship settlement. But Pip's the kind of engineer who can diagnose engine problems by listening to the hum of the coffee maker. She doesn't mistake structural sounds for anything else. Grok mentioned seeing Jake having animated conversations with his closed quarters door. Not talking through it to someone on the other side, mind you, but actually addressing the door itself like it might answer back. And Zara caught him in the supply closet at 3 a.m., stuffing his pockets with emergency ration packets. I should have confronted him immediately. Should have marched right up to his quarters and demanded an inspection. But here's the thing about command. Sometimes you really don't want to know what's behind door number 3, especially when door number 3 might cost you your license and your livelihood. So I did what any reasonable captain would do. I pretended not to notice and hoped the problem would solve itself. That strategy lasted exactly 4 days. I was in my office, catching up on navigation reports and trying to ignore the increasingly creative explanations my crew was giving for the mysterious sounds throughout the ship, when Jake knocked on my door. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, which, considering the bags under his eyes, might have been literally true. "Captain Thornwall," he said, fidgeting with something in his jacket pocket. "I need to tell you something." And that's when he opened his duffel bag and introduced me to the single most regulations-violating creature I'd ever seen. Small, orange, 4 legs, and equipped with the kind of eyes that could melt the heart of a Vulcan debt collector. "This is Whiskers," Jake said, like he was introducing me to his grandmother. "He's my emotional support cat." I stared at the tiny fur-covered violation of intergalactic law currently purring in my cargo hold, and only one thought went through my mind. We were all going to die in Federation prison. Now you might think that discovering an illegal biological companion aboard your ship would be the worst part of your day. You would be wrong. The worst part comes when that biological companion decides your ship is its new personal playground and you're just the landlord who forgot to read the lease agreement. Jake swore up and down that Whiskers was perfectly contained, completely harmless, and absolutely would not cause any problems. Jake, as it turns out, is either an optimist or a liar. Possibly both. It started small. A coffee mug that somehow migrated from the galley to the engine room overnight. A maintenance panel that kept opening by itself. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed, "Unauthorized life form loose on deck 4." Just the kind of minor mysteries that make you question your sanity and double-check your caffeine intake. Then Pip started reporting equipment malfunctions. Not serious ones, just weird little glitches that didn't make sense. Diagnostic systems running when no one activated them. Environmental controls adjusting themselves by a degree or two. Circuit breakers that kept switching off and on like they were practicing some kind of electrical dance routine. "It's like the ship's developed a nervous twitch," Pip told me. Her face lit up with the kind of excitement engineers get when faced with an impossible problem. "The computer logs show all the right commands being entered, but nobody's entering them. It's like we've got a ghost in the machine." A ghost. Right. If only ghosts were covered under Federation regulations. Meanwhile, Grok kept reporting strange noises in the lower decks. Scratching sounds in the walls, soft thuds in the ventilation system, and what he described as tiny footsteps that stop whenever I try to follow them. For a 7-foot security chief who once stared down a Regelian war beast without blinking, Grok was looking remarkably spooked. "Could be structural settling," Zara suggested during our morning briefing, though she didn't sound convinced. "Old ships make all kinds of sounds." "The stellar drift is only 12 years old," I pointed out. "Well, maybe she's aging poorly." Aging poorly, like the rest of us, apparently. The food situation was getting ridiculous, too. Our protein rations were disappearing at an alarming rate, specifically anything fish-based. The automated inventory system kept reporting discrepancies, but the security cameras showed nothing. It was like our supplies were vanishing into thin air, which would have been impressive if it weren't so expensive. Jake, meanwhile, was looking increasingly frazzled. Dark circles under his eyes, jumpier than a Centaurian cricket on espresso, and he'd developed this habit of checking every corner twice before entering a room. When I asked him about it, he just mumbled something about making sure everything was secure, and hurried away. 3 days into what I was privately calling the Great Denial period, things escalated. I was in the middle of reviewing shipping manifests when Pip's voice crackled over the comm system, pitched about 3 octaves higher than normal. "Captain, you need to get down to engineering. Now. And bring Grok. Maybe bring everyone, actually. This is either really cool or really terrifying, and I can't decide which." I found my entire crew clustered around the main engineering console, staring at something I couldn't see from the doorway. Pip was practically vibrating with excitement. Zara looked puzzled, and Grok was making that low, rumbling sound he only makes when he's trying not to panic. "What's the problem?" I asked, pushing through to get a better look. That's when I saw him. Orange fur, green eyes, sitting directly on top of our primary diagnostic display like he owned the place. Whiskers had apparently decided that his quarters were too cramming and the entire ship was now his domain. "He just appeared," Pip whispered, like she was afraid of scaring him away. 1 second the console was empty. The next second, There he was. And look at this. She pointed to the diagnostic readout, which was showing a series of system alerts I'd never seen before. Not errors, exactly, but warnings about components that were functioning within normal parameters but showing early signs of potential failure. Microfractures in hull plating, slight variations in engine output, atmospheric recycling efficiency dropping by fractions of a percent. These are all things we should probably check, Zared said slowly. But they're so minor our regular diagnostics wouldn't flag them for weeks. Whiskers stretched, yawned, and hopped down from the console to investigate a nearby access panel. The moment he left, all the mysterious alerts disappeared from the screen. Interesting, I said, which in captain speak translates to, "We are in so much trouble I can't even begin to calculate it." That's when the little furry saboteur looked directly at me, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking and had the audacity to purr. Now, I'd been in space long enough to know that when something impossible happens, you have two choices. You can either accept it and deal with the consequences, or you can pretend it didn't happen and hope reality gets the hint. I was leaning heavily toward option 2 when Whiskers decided to make that impossible. It started the next morning, during our routine system checks. I was on the bridge, nursing my third cup of coffee and trying to pretend I wasn't harboring a Federation fugitive, when every alarm on the ship started screaming at once. "Engine core temperature spike," Zar called out, her fingers flying over the controls. "Pressure building in the secondary coolant system." "Found it," Pip's voice crackled through the comm. "But Captain, this doesn't make sense. All the readings were normal 10 minutes ago." I was halfway to engineering when I saw him, Whiskers, sitting in the middle of the corridor like he was waiting for me, staring directly at access panel C-47. Not just looking at it casually, but focused, with the kind of intensity usually reserved for laser-guided missile systems. "Move, Cat," I muttered, stepping around him. That's when he did something that made my blood run cold. He meowed. Not a cute little kitten sound, but a sharp, urgent yowl that somehow managed to convey, "Pay attention, you moron," in perfect galactic standard. I stopped, looked at the access panel, looked at the cat, looked back at the panel. "Pip," I called into my comm. "Check the thermal coupling behind panel C-47. "Captain, that's not connected to the cooling system. It's just a data relay junction." "Check it anyway." 30 seconds later, Pip's voice came back, considerably higher in pitch. "Captain, there's a microfracture in the coupling housing. If this had failed during our next hyperspace jump, it would have triggered a cascade failure in the navigation computer." I stared at Whiskers. He stared back, then calmly began grooming his paw like preventing catastrophic system failures was just part of his daily routine. "How did you know?" I whispered. He ignored me and wandered off toward the galley, probably to steal more fish. That should have been enough weird for one day. The universe, however, was apparently just getting started. Over the next 48 hours, Whiskers began what I can only describe as a systematic inspection of my ship. He'd appear in different sections, always near critical systems, always with that same focused intensity, and every single time, we'd find something wrong. A loose connection in the atmospheric recycling unit that was 3 days away from failure. A hairline crack in a viewport seal that would have blown out during our next atmospheric entry. A power coupling that was slowly degrading and would have overloaded within the week. "It's like he can smell problems," Pip said, watching in fascination as Whiskers pawed at a maintenance hatch. "Or maybe he's detecting vibrations we can't feel. Some kind of enhanced sensory ability? Or maybe," Grok rumbled from behind us, "he's just really smart." Now, Grok doesn't talk much under normal circumstances. When he does speak, it's usually to point out obvious things like, "That asteroid is going to hit us," or "The hull breach is getting bigger." So when he offered an opinion about alien feline intelligence, I paid attention. "Smart how?" I asked. Grok knelt down, and to my amazement, Whiskers immediately patted over and rubbed against the security chief's massive hand. The sight of my 7-foot granite-skinned enforcer gently scratching behind a cat's ears was so surreal I briefly wondered if I was having some kind of stress-induced hallucination. "My people had creatures like this," Grok said softly, "long ago before we developed technology. Small hunters that lived in our cities, helped us find problems before they became dangerous. They could sense things we couldn't, structural weaknesses, gas leaks, electrical failures. We called them Whisper Guardians, because they seemed to know secrets the buildings themselves were keeping." "That's a lovely story," I said, "but this is a starship, not an ancient city." Grok looked up at me with the kind of expression that suggested I was missing something obvious. Captain, what do you think a starship is? It's just a very small city that flies through space, and cities have always needed guardians. Before I could process that particular piece of philosophy, Whiskers suddenly shot away from Grok's hand and bolted down the corridor toward the engine room, yowling like the ship was on fire. "That's not good," Pitt said, which, in engineer speak, roughly translates to, "We're all about to die." We found Whiskers in the engine room, sitting directly in front of the primary fusion reactor control panel, making a sound I'd never heard from a cat before. Not quite a meow, not quite a growl, but something urgent and demanding that made every hair on my arms stand up. "What's he looking at?" Zara asked, scanning the readouts. "Everything shows normal." But Whiskers wasn't looking at the main display. He was staring at a small diagnostic screen tucked away in the corner, one that monitored the magnetic containment field fluctuations. As we watched, a tiny blip appeared on the wave pattern. Then another. Then a third. "Field oscillation," Pitt breathed. "It's minor now, but if it builds up resonance, the containment could destabilize. We'd have maybe 15 minutes before core breach." "How long until it reaches critical?" I asked. "At this rate of progression? 6 hours, maybe 7. I looked down at Whiskers, who had apparently decided his work was done and was now calmly washing his face. "And if we hadn't caught it? We'd all be particles of superheated plasma scattered across 3 solar systems." Whiskers finished grooming, looked up at me with those impossibly green eyes, and purred. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just coincidence or enhanced feline senses. Somehow, this small Earth creature was interfacing with my ship's systems in ways that shouldn't be possible. Reading patterns, detecting anomalies, predicting failures before our own computers could flag them. "Jake," I called over the comm, "report to engineering. Now." When Jake arrived, looking like he expected to be thrown out an airlock, I pointed at his cat. "Explain. Everything. And don't leave out any details about how your emotional support animal apparently moonlights as a predictive maintenance system." Jake's face went through several interesting color changes before he finally sighed. "You're not going to believe this. Try me. At this point, I'm prepared to believe your cat is actually an undercover Federation inspector." "Close," Jake said. "He's a graduate of the Terran Institute for Advanced Animal Cognition, specifically their Mechanical Systems Interface program." I blinked. "Their what now?" "Humans have been training cats to work with technology for about 50 years now. Turns out they're naturally good at it. Something about their sensory processing and pattern recognition abilities. Whiskers here has a certification in starship maintenance and a minor in emergency response." I stared at the cat, who was now investigating a control panel with the focused attention of a trained professional. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that Earth cats are qualified maintenance technicians?" "The good ones are," Jake said proudly. "Whiskers graduated top of his class." And that's how I learned that humans, in their infinite creativity, had turned household pets into the most effective maintenance crew in the galaxy. Of course, the universe has a sense of humor about these things. Just when I was starting to think that maybe, possibly, having an illegal but highly qualified feline crew member wasn't the worst thing that could happen to my ship, fate decided to remind me why optimism is a luxury captains can't afford. The message came through on our priority channel at exactly 3:47 hours, ship time. I was in my quarters, finally getting some sleep after spending the day watching Whiskers prevent our communications array from experiencing what Pip cheerfully described as a really spectacular overload, when Zara's voice crackled through the comm with the kind of urgency that makes your stomach drop into your boots. "Captain, we've got an incoming priority transmission from Federation Command. They're ordering us to maintain current position and prepare for immediate inspection." I was on the bridge in under 2 minutes, still pulling on my uniform jacket and trying to convince myself this was just a routine check, the kind of inspection that happens to every cargo freighter at least once a year, where board officials poke around your ship for a few hours, fine you for minor paperwork violations, and send you on your way. Then I saw the ship. The FS Regulation, a dreadnought-class enforcement vessel that could have used my entire ship as a shuttlecraft, the kind of ship they send when someone has really spectacularly violated Federation law, the kind of ship equipped with sensors so advanced they could probably tell you what you had for breakfast 3 days ago. "Incoming transmission," Zara announced, though her voice had gone about 2 octaves higher than usual. The main screen flickered to life, revealing what had to be the most regulation-obsessed being I'd ever seen. Inspector Krell, according to his credentials, was Altarian. Tall, thin, with skin like polished metal and eyes that looked like they could spot a regulation violation from 3 sectors away. His uniform was so perfectly pressed it could have been used as a cutting tool, and he held himself with the rigid posture of someone who'd never encountered a rule he didn't want to enforce twice. "Captain Thornwall," Krell said, his voice carrying the kind of clipped precision that suggested he'd practiced removing every trace of personality from his speech. "I am Inspector Krell, of the Federation Compliance Division. We have received reports of unusual activity aboard your vessel." My mouth went dry. "What kind of unusual activity, Inspector?" "Unauthorized biological signatures detected during routine sensor sweeps of this sector. As per Federation Regulation 847B, I am authorized to conduct a complete inspection of your vessel to verify compliance with the Universal Biological Companion Prohibition Act." Behind me, I heard Jake make a sound like a small animal being strangled, which, considering our current situation, seemed appropriate. "Of course, Inspector," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "We welcome the inspection and are fully compliant with all Federation regulations." It was, technically, the biggest lie I'd ever told in 23 years of spaceflight. "Excellent. Prepare for boarding in 30 minutes. Have your crew assembled for interview and ensure all areas of your ship are accessible for examination." The transmission ended, leaving us staring at a blank screen and contemplating our imminent careers in Federation prison. 30 minutes, Pip whispered. "How are we supposed to hide a cat in 30 minutes? "We could put him in the escape pod," Grok suggested helpfully. "And explain why our escape pod is full of cat hair and fish smell?" Zara shook her head. "They'd figure it out in seconds." Jake was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, which, under the circumstances, was probably an unfortunate metaphor. "Maybe I could claim he's not actually a biological companion. Maybe he's a really advanced robot that just looks like a cat." "A robot that eats fish and uses a litter box?" I asked. "A very advanced robot?" That's when Whiskers himself solved the problem by walking onto the bridge like he owned the place, hopping up onto the captain's chair and settling down for what appeared to be a nap. "Well," I said, looking down at the small orange creature who had somehow become the center of the worst crisis of my career, "I hope you have a plan, because we're out of options." Whiskers opened one green eye, looked at me with what I swear was amusement, and went back to sleep. The next 25 minutes were the longest of my life. We tried everything, hiding Whiskers in cargo containers, tucking him into maintenance shafts, even attempting to disguise him as ship's equipment with a small sign reading, "Biological Waste Processing Unit Do Not Touch." Nothing worked. Every time we thought we had him secured, he'd appear somewhere else, usually in a more visible location than before. "It's like he doesn't understand we're trying to help him," Jake muttered, chasing Whiskers away from the main airlock for the 3rd time. "Or," Grok grumbled thoughtfully, "he understands better than we do." Before I could ask what that meant, the docking alert chimed, and Inspector Krell's voice announced that boarding would commence in 60 seconds. "This is it," I said to my crew. "When they find him, I take full responsibility. You all claim ignorance, and maybe you'll keep your licenses." "Captain," Zara said firmly, "we're a crew, we stick together." "Absolutely," Pip added. "Besides, if we're going to prison, at least we'll have an interesting story to tell." Even Grok nodded his massive head in agreement. Prison food cannot be worse than emergency rations. I'd never been prouder of my crew, or more terrified for our future. The airlock cycled open, and Inspector Krell stepped aboard, followed by 2 Federation security officers and enough scanning equipment to outfit a small research station. Krell himself carried a device that looked like it could detect organic molecules from orbit. "Captain Thornwall," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we will begin with a deck-by-deck scan, followed by individual crew interviews. Please remain with your personnel in this area." The inspection began immediately. Krell's scanner swept over every surface, every panel, every corner of the ship. The device beeped and hummed constantly, cataloging every trace of organic material it detected. I watched the readout over his shoulder, seeing spikes whenever it passed areas where Whiskers had been. We were caught. It was just a matter of time before Krell connected the readings to an unauthorized biological companion. That's when the ship's environmental system alarm went off. Not the gentle chime that indicates a minor adjustment, but the urgent, pulsing warning that means something is seriously wrong with the air you're breathing. "What's that?" Krell demanded, his scanner momentarily forgotten. Zara was already at the environmental controls, her face pale. "Atmospheric processor malfunction. Carbon dioxide levels are spiking in sectors 7 through 12. "How serious?" I asked, though I already knew from her expression. "Life-threatening," If we can't get it under control in the next few minutes, those sections will become uninhabitable. Inspector Krell looked at his scanner, then at the environmental warning lights, clearly torn between his investigation and the immediate danger. That's when Whiskers made his entrance. He didn't just walk onto the bridge this time. He bounded in like his tail was on fire, yowling at the top of his lungs and heading straight for the environmental control station. Before anyone could stop him, he leaped up onto the console and began pawing at a specific section of the display. "Get that animal away from there," Krell shouted, reaching for Whiskers. "Wait," I said, suddenly understanding. "Let him show us." Whiskers was focused on a subsystem readout buried 3 levels deep in the diagnostic menu. A backup atmospheric processor that our scanners showed as functioning normally, but which the cat was indicating with the kind of urgency usually reserved for fire drills. "Pip," I called, "check backup processor 7 Alpha, manual inspection." "Captain, the scanners show it's fine." "Check it anyway." 30 seconds later, Pip's voice came through the comm, tight with professional concern. "Captain, the intake valve is completely blocked. Looks like a manufacturing defect that finally gave way. If this had failed completely, the primary processor would have been overwhelmed within minutes." I looked at Inspector Krell, whose expression had gone from rigid authority to confusion to something approaching wonder. "How did it know?" he asked quietly. "Inspector," I said, making the biggest gamble of my career. "Meet Whiskers. Certified maintenance technician, graduated top of his class from the Terran Institute for Advanced Animal Cognition, and the reason we're all still breathing." Krell stared at the cat, who had apparently decided his work was done and was now calmly grooming his paw. The scanner in the inspector's hand was still beeping steadily, indicating massive biological contamination throughout the ship. "This is highly irregular," Krell said finally. "Yes, sir, it is. Biological companions are strictly forbidden on Federation vessels." "Yes, sir, they are. However," and here Krell's voice took on a slightly different tone, "there is precedent for emergency exceptions to Regulation 8417B in cases where said biological entity provides essential safety services to the vessel and crew." I blinked. "There is?" Subsection 847B7, enacted after the vegan mining station incident in 2391. A canine unit detected a gas leak that would have killed 300 miners. The regulation was amended to allow for biological safety personnel under specific circumstances. Krell looked down at Whiskers, who chose that moment to purr loudly enough to be heard over the environmental systems. "I will need to file a report," the inspector continued. "This will require extensive documentation and a formal review process." "Of course," I said, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. "However, given the circumstances and the clear evidence of this creature's safety capabilities, I am prepared to recommend immediate provisional certification pending full review." And that's how Whiskers became the first cat in Federation history to receive official authorization as a biological safety specialist. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my captain's chair, watching Whiskers perform what has become his daily ritual, a complete inspection of our primary systems that somehow manages to be both adorable and professionally thorough. He's currently investigating a power coupling that, according to our instruments, is functioning perfectly. According to Whiskers, it needs attention within the next 48 hours. I've learned not to question him. The paperwork from Inspector Krell's report took 3 months to process, during which time Whiskers prevented 2 more potentially catastrophic failures, detected a hull microfracture that would have turned into a major breach during our next atmospheric entry, and somehow managed to optimize our engine efficiency by 12% just by sitting in specific locations throughout the ship. The Federation, it turns out, is very interested in 12% efficiency improvements. "Captain," Zura called from her station, "we're getting another request from the cargo hauler Distant Star. They want to know if we can spare our consultant for a few days to help with their engine problems." I chuckled. The Distant Star was the 4th ship this month to request Whiskers' services. Word had gotten out through the freight network that the Stellar Drift had somehow acquired the most effective maintenance specialist in the galaxy, and everyone wanted to borrow our secret weapon. "Tell them he's booked solid through next quarter," I said. "But we can put them on the waiting list." It's funny how quickly things change. 6 months ago, I was terrified of having a cat aboard my ship. Now, I can't imagine running operations without him. Whiskers has become as essential to our crew as Pip's engineering genius or Grok's security expertise. More essential, if I'm being honest, since he's the only one who can predict problems before they happen. Jake has been fielding offers from half the merchant fleet to train their cats in basic maintenance procedures. Turns out the Terran Institute for Advanced Animal Cognition has a waiting list 3 years long for their mechanical systems interface program, and demand is growing by the week. Who knew that the solution to space travel's reliability problems would come from Earth's most independent pets? Captain, Pip's voice came through the comm. Whiskers is doing that thing again where he stares at the quantum drive housing. Should I run a diagnostic? Run the diagnostic, I confirmed. The last time Whiskers had stared at our quantum drive with that particular intensity, we'd discovered a resonance buildup that would have torn us apart mid-jump. The diagnostic came back showing everything normal, but I'd learned to trust feline intuition over computer readouts. Schedule maintenance for tomorrow, I added. Full teardown of the quantum assembly. Already on it, Pip replied cheerfully. Whiskers hasn't been wrong yet. That's when my personal communicator chimed with an incoming message marked with Federation Command priority codes. I opened it, expecting another routine update on shipping regulations or sector traffic patterns. Instead, I found myself reading the most surreal official document of my entire career. Federation Regulation 8407B has been amended, I announced to my crew. Effective immediately, certified biological safety specialists are not only permitted aboard Federation vessels, but are actively encouraged for all long-range cargo and exploration missions. The amendment went on to detail the new certification requirements, training protocols, and something called the Whiskers Standard for feline maintenance specialists. There was even a subsection about establishing biological safety specialist breeding programs to meet the growing demand. Be more named a regulation after our cat, Jake said, sounding awed. Not just any regulation, Zara added, reading over my shoulder. They're recommending that every major shipping line acquire at least one certified animal specialist within the next 2 years. Grok, who had developed an impressive bond with Whiskers over the past few months, made his rumbling laugh sound. The Federation is about to discover what humans have known for thousands of years. Cats make everything better. I looked down at Whiskers, who had finished his inspection and was now demanding attention by headbutting my leg. He looked up at me with those impossibly green eyes and purred, probably satisfied that he'd single-handedly revolutionized interstellar safety protocols. You know what the best part is? I asked my crew. What's that, Captain? Pip asked. We're about to make a fortune in consulting fees. The next month brought a parade of ships wanting to hire our services. The ore hauler Titan's Pride needed help diagnosing mysterious power fluctuations. The passenger liner Silver Dawn wanted Whiskers to inspect their life support systems before a major cruise. Even a Federation military vessel quietly requested assistance with some classified maintenance issues that their own engineers couldn't identify. Each consultation ended the same way. Whiskers would spend a few hours exploring the ship, identify problems that conventional diagnostics missed, and prevent what would have been expensive or dangerous failures. Word spread through the shipping networks faster than bad news, and soon we had a waiting list stretching into next year. The real vindication came when Inspector Krell himself requested our services for his own ship. The regulation, despite being equipped with the most advanced diagnostic systems in the Federation fleet, had been experiencing intermittent sensor malfunctions that nobody could explain. Whiskers found the problem in 20 minutes. A microscopic crack in a sensor array housing that was causing electromagnetic interference during specific engine configurations. The repair took an hour and saved the Federation the cost of replacing their entire sensor grid. Remarkable, Krell admitted as he watched Whiskers receive treats from his grateful security team. I have submitted a formal recommendation to Federation Command that all enforcement vessels be equipped with certified biological specialists. All of them? I asked. The efficiency improvements alone justify the program, Krell replied. But the safety benefits are unprecedented. Do you realize that ship failures have decreased by 67% in sectors where biological specialists are operating? I hadn't realized that, but it didn't surprise me. Cats, as it turns out, are very good at preventing the kind of catastrophic failures that kill people in space. 6 months after Inspector Krell's visit, the first class of Federation-certified maintenance cats graduated from the newly established Interstellar Animal Safety Academy. 23 cats, each trained in basic Starship systems, emergency detection protocols, and what the instructors carefully termed interpretive communication techniques. Jake was hired as the chief instructor, which he claimed was the best job in the galaxy. Teaching cats to save lives, he told me during his going-away party. How was that not the perfect career? Whiskers, meanwhile, had been promoted to senior biological safety specialist and was considering offers from 3 different shipping consortiums. Not that I was planning to let him go. He'd become too valuable to the stellar drift, and more importantly, he'd become family. "You know," I said to him one evening as he performed his nightly inspection of the bridge systems, "when I first found out about you, I thought my career was over." Whiskers paused in his examination of the navigation console to look at me with what I'd learned to recognize as his "humans are adorable but slow" expression. "Instead, you've given me the best job in the galaxy, consulting fees, Federation contracts, and the safest ship in the merchant fleet." He purred, apparently satisfied with the acknowledgement, and went back to work. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about one exceptional cat or one creative human who'd bent the rules. This was about something bigger. Humans, faced with a problem, had looked at their oldest companions and asked, "How can we make this better?" Instead of accepting that space travel was inherently dangerous, they'd found a way to make it safer by partnering with creatures that most species considered nothing more than decorative pets. Leave it to humans to turn household animals into interstellar safety experts. Leave it to humans to look at a regulation designed to prevent problems and figure out how to solve problems instead. And leave it to a small orange cat named Whiskers to prove that sometimes the best technology is the kind that purrs when you scratch behind its ears. The last entry in my captain's log from that period reads, "Note to self, never underestimate human creativity, feline intelligence, or the power of a really good purr to change the entire galaxy." Whiskers, I'm sure, would approve.